So we just saw Revolution by Jack O'Connell, featuring Louise Malone, who is here with us from New Mexico. Is that where you live now? All right. Well, so 20-year-old from Scottsdale, and as it turns out, you were cast into this film. It wasn't as if Jack went around to Haight-Ashbury looking around Hippie Hill trying to find the person to focus on. How did it come about that you were cast?
I was coming up the stairs. Can you hear me? I was coming up the stairs in the Avalon, and a girl handed me a piece of paper that said, "Girl needed for lead part in movie, no experience necessary." And for some reason, I knew that I was going to do this. I just knew. And I went and talked to him, sat down with Jack O'Connell and they had me talk into a microphone to see if my voice was okay. And took some photographs and called me back the next day and said, "You're our girl."
Wow.
So, and it was awesome. I mean, I didn't always get to say what I wanted to say. Quite often I had to say things that was the director's agenda more than mine. But I did have a blast. It was chosen to go to 3 European film festivals that year. And I got to go, and so it was a wonderful opportunity. I met fabulous people, and a lot of people I love are here right now. And so it's awesome. I love this. This is great.
So even at the Avalon Ballroom, you knew it was going to be a film about the Haight-Ashbury and about the hippies?
Not at first, no.
Okay.
So when I called the phone number, then they explained to me what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. All right. Looking back on it now, do you feel you were, or even back then when you first saw it, were you fairly portrayed?
Everyone had their point of view, everyone had their own experience. And it was a bit of my experience and a bit of a lot of other people's point of view. And there were parts of it I would have loved to have taken out or shortened. And there were things that I really wished I could say that wound up on the cutting room floor. But
Well, there are outtakes,
yeah.
somewhere. I understand.
Yeah.
Jean, Dr. Hipp, Dr. Schoenfeld, since you were not in the film, as far as I know, you might have been in the crowd. Maybe were you in the nude scene there with the Ann Halpern dancers, Country Joe? How did you feel about this movie, having now seen it?
Well, it's the first time I've seen this movie, but I was here during that time. I thought it was an excellent portrayal of the times and the way people felt and what they were doing.
Were there revelations for you? You were there, but for me, for example, seeing exactly how that communal flat or apartment or house looked, and with a dozen people jammed in there, had you seen those scenes during the 60s?
Oh, yes. Yes, I'd been, within many homes and communes. And, I was at the Morning Star Ranch and spent some time there. And yes, it was an accurate depiction of what was going on during that time.
I wish they'd put captions and told the names of the people that were in the film.
Right.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, the real shortcoming there in terms of the authorities as well as the known people. We all, well, us San Franciscans, know Herb Caen and Willie Brown, but the police chief, the health officer, Dr. Ellis D. Sachs, a wonderful name for those times and for his job, the health director of San Francisco. It would have been nice to have known who they were exactly, what their authority was. Diane, you're in the film.
Yes.
Yeah, they are.
You're in the concert scene, a park, and how did that happen?
Well, Ambrose Red Moon Hollingsworth was our manager, and he got us the gig up there on, that was Mount Tam, and the amphitheater. And it was great. It was just great, because just the vibe of the whole scene, and for us to be the only woman band in the area at that time, was just a perfect opportunity for us to just express ourselves and what we wanted to do. And, we followed Quicksilver around a lot too, because Ambrose also managed him at first before Ron Pulte. And during that time, we opened for the Quicksilver all the time.
Oh,
Yeah. And we're there, but we're almost invisible during that time. Like, a lot of people never heard of us, but we were there. and
you're still here.
And I'm still here.
In case we run
And
short
we
on,
are also.
in case we run short on time, you just had a recent honor from the Board of Supervisors, and you are at work, have been now for a couple of years, I know, on a new CD, correct?
That is correct.
great.
After all these years, it's been 50 years. Since 1967, I'm from Mount Tam, and we finally got a record deal.
Finally.
We're finally acknowledged for the time that we did during that era.
Yeah.
And
An overnight success.
yeah, when you're talking about time, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And you just get there. But like it's going to be like a 3 CD album coming out, spring or summer of next year.
Yeah.
And we were trying to make it for this year, but you can't push creativity, and you have to let it just develop and grow. And it's an amazing. It's going to be amazing. Just looking forward to it.
Did the women in Ace of Cups get speaking parts? Was there ever any plan on you doing more than playing at Mount Tam?
Not speaking parts, no.
Okay. I just wonder how Jack handled the various people he ran into, whether it was band members, people on the streets, people at the med clinic, hired cast members, whether he created scenes. Now, I want you to try to climb a tree, Or I want you, he actually would tell
That
you.
happened, yeah.
Because you didn't seem like the most gung-ho tree climber I've ever seen.
Well, I wasn't the best tree climber, period.
What else did he make you do that you felt, oh man, this ain't me? Like lying on the grass giggling?
No, that was real.
That was real, yeah.
Are at least the co-gigglers here?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, well done.
Well, Marlene and Rebecca and I all lived in Petaluma. There were 7 of us. And we've been friends. That was 1968. But we all met on Haight Street at the corner of Haight and Cole.
Mm-hmm.
And
So you're hired from a flyer, and you're plopped into the scene, although you've been part of the scene anyway, right? Because you visited, you had friends there. So was there a lot of manufacturing of those scenes? Are you skipping around, running into the arms of friends or whatever, hanging out with them?
I think, if I remember correctly, but you know what they say about memory in the 60s, but if I remember correctly, that was one where, it was his guidance as director. Run up, but, I was happy to see them.
Dr. Jean, I should learn a title for you, but Dr. Schoenfeld, what was your own interaction in the Haight-Ashbury 50 years ago?
Well, I had just returned from doing research in Gabon, in West Africa. I was there to do a research project on hypertension in Gabon, but I became more interested in the use there of a drug called ibogaine, which comes from the iboga root. And I was very interested. I had taken LSD once before going there, so naturally interested in psychedelics. And after I left Gabon, I went to France because the French were using small quantities of ibogaine combined with vitamins as a pickup tonic, because small quantities of psychedelics act as a stimulant. We see this currently today with microdosing of LSD. Well, I got a quantity from the laboratory in Paris, and I brought that back to the United States, and I found that there was a young doctor named David Smith who was doing experiments at the University of California with laboratory animals with psychoactive drugs. So I joined him, and we were doing experiments on rats with amphetamines and mescaline. And then there was some human experimentation that happened with Ibogaine. And during that time, David formed the idea of having the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic, of combining, there were little clinics that had been set up by the diggers. And he had the idea of combining it into one clinic.
Founded it in June 50 years ago.
Yes.
Yes, all right.
It was 50 years ago in this past June.
Yes.
And I had the idea of writing about the effects of drugs. And this was because, as I say, there was some human experimentation that went on. And that is how the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic began, and that's how the Dr. Hip columns began.
Originally in the Berkeley Barb.
Yes, it
Right.
started, my columns started in the Berkeley Barb.
Yes.
And then after a couple of years, it was picked up by the San Francisco Chronicle and then syndicated by United Press Syndicate.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, the Berkeley Barb was being hawked by one young woman in
Yes.
the movie.
Yes, I noticed that.
So now, Louise, was that for real? Or were
Oh,
you?
that was for real. Yeah, well, they set it up. They wanted me to sell them, but I did that anyhow. That was a good
did.
way to make
right.
some money.
So you were paid for your work in the movie, but
Yes.
you still needed to earn more money to be able to afford oatmeal and bars.
Twinkies.
Diane, how real, you hear the branding of the music of that time as, well, firstly, San Francisco sound, and then psychedelic music and acid rock. And as I've gone through the years writing about the scene, more and more the band members say, yeah, we were always on acid when we were on stage. You couldn't go up there sometimes without being high. How was that for the Ace of Cups and yourself?
I think only one time, I think it was high on acid, and it was strange.
Could you
To
tell
say the
how it
least.
impacted your drumming and your rhythm and your timing?
I don't know exactly what happened or how it went, but everybody said it was great. But I remember looking at my snare drum and that, on the bottom head, it was clear, and the top, you can kind of see through it. And as I was looking through it, I think, I have X-ray vision. It was like, whoa, but.
But at least there were
that's
no
part-
monsters crawling out of it.
Yeah, right. Some people experience that, but that was the only time. I just wanted to be playing and be, know
Right.
what's going on a little bit. And that taking acid would be. I loved it when you were in the woods or in the nature,
Yes.
and then everything then is really mellow when you're in. When you're on the street and you see a car coming. It was like a monster, these big lights and this whole face on it.
Right.
Everything that wasn't organic, really, you noticed that it was out of place.
And of course,
Wires and,
Yeah.
we have Louise, the acid head here. At one point, didn't you say something about having had 23 trips?
Oh, yeah, probably, yeah.
Actually,
At that time, if that was early on.
and that was real. We're just getting going.
Well, yeah, where we met, we were producing, they were producing pure LSD on vitamin C tabs.
Did you keep track of your trips? How
No.
did you know you had 23 under your belt?
I guessed.
Hollywood in San Francisco.
Well, but I did get to say what I wanted. So that when I sold the newspapers, that was me acting up, being silly. It made it more fun and more real,
Right. Speaking of real, I don't remember seeing that many nude people.
Yeah, that was Jack's thing.
Now, Jack, laughs right into Jack Benny there. Jack was 20 years older than you and I'm sure most of the people in the film. Did that impact the way the film was made? Was he
To a degree, yes. And he came out of New York, and he had worked with Fellini and Antonioni, and he had that vision at that time, and there was a lot of the, sexual revolution and all of that, and he felt it was a part of art, and that a beautiful form was a beautiful form. That was his vision.
So let's spend 15 minutes on it. Yeah.
Yeah, not an hour and a half, but that's okay.
And mostly focusing on the women, of course. Yes. All right. There was an update of this film in 1986 in which you appeared looking at yourself 20 years before and talking about what you had gone through. And one of the things I heard clearest was your kind of reevaluation of drug usage and what drugs did for you and also probably to you. Can you restate some of that, how you feel now? As a mother especially?
Yeah. Well, I think the drugs are much more dangerous now. And I was really protected in a lot of ways in my life. And I kind of have a picture of myself as this girl standing on the edge of a cliff, leaning out as far as she can go with all these angels or fairies hanging onto her skirts. And that's kind of like how my life was then. And I met wonderful people and we took care of each other. But after years of meditation and doing yoga and things like that, I felt like it would have been better to have had the discipline beforehand to so that the vision was not out of the blue. In other words, I think it's very valuable, and I think it's a real experience. But I also think that preparation and discipline will take you to that place anyway. And I also feel like it made us very, very open to the energies around us. And I think that if you were around negative energy, you could have a negative trip. And I was fortunate to be around amazing, positive people. And so I never had a bad trip. But I also feel like that wasn't LSD a precursor to some of the psychiatric drugs they're using now?
Well,
like Prozac and...
No.
No?
No.
Okay, then...
No, not related.
Get that.
But now, finally, after we've lost more than 50 years, finally, there are being studies allowed using LSD and psilocybin, and we can expect that they will be used in psychiatry more in the next few years. Finally,
Well, there was
after
so
losing
much research done.
after losing all before
Yeah,
before the ban, there was a lot of research that found LSD could be useful in treating alcoholism and drug addiction.
In Canada?
Canada.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Dr. Schoenfeld, did you feel the film was pretty accurate in portraying what the scene was like overall in terms of the good and the not so good and even the evil? You were part of a circle that provided support services to a lot of the people, right? They were runaways or residents. Through the Huckleberry House, an invaluable resource, the Free Medical Clinic, the good work of the Diggers and other organizations in the community. Did you feel the film reflected all of that and also said, besides talking to the politicians and the police, that there was more to it than just peace and love and good vibes?
There was more. There was a downside, most of which occurred after the film was made.
Yes.
After that period, yes, it was a downside. I mean, after all, it was a time when one could walk down the street and you could recognize people who were like you. For a time, that long hair, or perhaps the way they dressed. Then after a time, it became a fad, and a person with long hair may not at all have been like you. It might have been Charles Manson, which actually happened. So, there was that period of time, but then it degenerated and a lot of it was associated with more harmful drugs,
That was exactly.
like heroin and the abuse of amphetamines.
Sure.
I mean, because almost all drugs can be useful in proper circumstances. But it's taken a long time for us to learn that, and we're still learning about it.
Diane, you probably saw the film shortly after it was released partly because you were in it. Have you seen it many times over the years, and now watching it again, do you have feelings about the impact on you?
Yeah, it's been, it was just 2 other times, and it was a long time ago, so I get some of them mixed up. There's been a few films about the 60s and which
yes.
ones, and this one is my favorite, actually. And during that time, this film portrayed pretty much what was happening during that time. And what was the question?
Well, but the point you make too, over the years we've seen so many documentaries on TV networks as well as feature releases, and they tend to be a pastiche of found footage. And they grab a CBS documentary here and an interview here and a home movie of the Bean or the Trips Festival. It's not the same as having a crew consistently following a group of people at that time with those bands. Playing for this film, so it's much more intact. I was just wondering if, looking at it again today, you felt you learned anything new about the impact of that summer on yourself as a person.
Oh, anything new, I would say, just how it actually impacted the generation at that time, and how you could reinvent yourself during that time. And now that we're in this place now, I see we're still there.
Yes.
We're still there, and we can still reinvent ourselves and change things. And the revolution within is where it starts. And that's what I've learned from there to here and looking back. And that's where it comes from.
Yes.
The revolution within yourself and making your change for the better good for all people.
Yes. So, Louise, you are a most a lovely presence on the screen. The cameras absolutely embraced you, and it being a time of free love, I'm wondering, were there a lot of guys and perhaps gals coming after you during this time of the shooting?
Well, no. Well, I was very busy. I mean, I was there with the crew, and I was learning.
Was it like a daily thing then, where you would
Yes.
meet and well, today we'll shoot in the park, today we'll shoot?
We'll go up
at
to
the-
Morningside, or
Yeah. So you had no time for permissiveness to.
No, and I was incredibly naive. I was very young, and half the time, if someone was coming on to me, I had no idea. I know that sounds weird, but it was really the truth.
Well, you were on acid, probably.
Yeah, well, that's a good point.
Yeah. I think by the magic of timing, we have a few minutes. If you have a question or two, are you open for questions?
Oh, sure.
All right. Anybody want to ask a question? Let's take the gentleman there.
Oh, yeah. That's what makes me a good grandmother.
I was there at the time fully, and I love what you said about the transformation spiritually that took place. To me, that was the pivotal crossroads moment that had the oligarchy terrified that
Yes.
they would crumble. And so to hear that that's the path you've gone, can you tell us more of your spiritual unfoldment, which is so clear, place within you?
Well, I somehow came into this life being a spiritual being, and it wasn't formed by church or the things, my parents, but I always had an interest in it. And as I as I grew, when I went through the 60s and when I went through the Haight-Ashbury, I was fortunate that I was around a lot of people. I would go to the Krishna temple for breakfast, and I would sit in meditations, go to Stephen's classes. It was just, it was something that was important to me. That and healing, I became a nurse. And so from there, I love the roots of every religion. I believe in disorganized religion. I really do. And I see I can worship with anyone, I can jump over the Beltane fire. I can, meditate. I can pray. You had your hand up.
Yes. Go ahead, sir.
My thought about the whole background is that it was very, very political.
Yes.
Anti-Vietnam War kind of
Yes.
through the movie and the times, going nude. Now we can't go nude in San Francisco anymore. There was a whole range of really, the revolution part, I think, was a very political thing. It was anti-establishment, anti-corporate, and so on and so forth. And I don't know that comes out very explicitly in the film.
To me, the important thing that was happening there was that we were looking around and seeing that there were people who were being treated differently. And there were people who were being overlooked. And so I think we went to embrace everyone, just to learn. We went to learn. We went to school. And I think that the part of it was the war. We marched. I marched for everything because it was important. Gay rights came out of it. Women's liberation came out of it. And of course, the integration continued. I get a little worried about seeing it come back around again today. Wow. And that very much concerns me.
Louise, when did you revert back to your name, Louise? I mean, that is, how long did today last?
Oh, well, some people tease me, but I call myself Yesterday Malone now.
I was going to call you that at the beginning.
I'd have loved
Gentleman.
it.
Yes, right. So but I know you became a mom within a year or two after the film.
I used the name Today purposely, partly because I loved it, and one of the people in the film gave me the name, Don did, and I really loved the idea that it meant be here now, and I also went with that because if it turned out to be a terrible film, and I hated it, I could be Louise still, but Louie, people call me Louie.
Any other one last question? Yes, ma'am. The one, that's right, you.
So you were here in San Francisco at the time, so did you take LSD?
Did I? Or Ben?
Me. Only once.
Was that
And
bad,
I don't
huh?
remember it. No, I wasn't.
So you were there.
I should have taken much more, actually, given the jobs I had. Yes. Yes. Yes, be careful what... Yes, right. No, he is in the house. All right, one more. Right here, sir. Go ahead.
I want to ask Louise something.
What, Grant? Go.
You want to ask when we danced at the Avalon?
No. I was dancing with you.
Took only 50 years to learn that. Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much to Diane, to Jean, and to Louise. Thanks to you, and the library welcomes you now to partake of snacks and also check out the brand new exhibit all about the Summer of Love. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.